I'm Algernon Cash, and this is Eat, Drink Triad, your leading source for everything happening with the local food and beverage community. As always, I am so excited to bring you an exciting conversation. And today we have Mayor Newell Clark, who's going to be talking about a new ordinance that's being debated in Lexington that could allow open carrying of alcohol in select districts. So I know if you're a resident of Lexington, you may either love or you may hate that debate, but we're going to dive into it a little bit and see if we got any questions for Mayor Clark. Before we do that, because this has been a really big news day, actually, and just moments before I jumped on to do the show today, I saw a post from Finnegan's Wake here in downtown Winston-Salem on Trade Street. They just announced today, literally right before my show started, they just announced they are closing permanently. They have been in business for 15 years. Opie, who is the owner operator, has been in the restaurant industry for 20 years and has just made a decision that he is going to close permanently this upcoming Saturday. And for anyone in my audience, especially if you watch or if you follow WTOB, because our studio is located on Trade Street, right across the street from Finnegan's Wake. A lot of people in downtown Winston-Salem are talking about this. I think this was a huge impact, a huge blow. A lot of people didn't see it coming, but I do want to say that I have constantly tried to remind people that I think you are going to see, unfortunately, you will see more restaurants and bars closing before this is all over. And that is very unfortunate, but it is something that we do need to be prepared for. And I do think when it gets colder outside and the winter months start to set in, it is going to become increasingly difficult for our restaurants and bars to continue navigating. They don't have the capital reserves that they need. Some customers are still very nervous about going inside restaurants and bars and the staffing shortage. And so there's a perfect storm that is still brewing. A lot of people think the storm is over. It's not. The storm is still right here with us. And there's a lot of pressure and pain for our local restaurants and bars. So please make sure you keep that in mind. Be patient when you go out and think about all those things. Mayor Clark, so glad to have you here, man. I always tell people that if I never had met you, I don't know if I would have ever realized that Lexington sells anything more than barbecue. And people, I was down, I had lunch with you the other day. There's two ladies who were in Rustic Roots when I came down, and they recognized me and they said I'm a huge cheerleader and champion for Lexington. And I said, no, the biggest cheerleader, biggest champion for Lexington is Mayor Newell Clark, because he attracted me and he attracts so many people to come down to Lexington to see what's happening. And I learned about a little restaurant down there called Sophie's Cork and Ale. Got a chance to finally meet the chef, Chef John Wilson. And as many of you know, just recently, Chef John Wilson was awarded our Triad Burger Week champion. He beat out 24 restaurants across the region to bring the gold strap back down to Lexington. Mayor Clark, before we jump into the conversation about the new ordinance you all are debating, how did it feel just to see John, receive that kind of recognition?
Well, thank you for again, always helping Lexington in terms of giving us coverage. We appreciate it. And thanks for your kind words. But I tell everyone all the time, it's a team effort here. It's not just me. It's not just the council. It's not just administration. It's all of us. It's the citizens. It's our entrepreneurs. And John is a great example of that. He's native to Davidson County. Lexington's his hometown. This guy is wickedly talented. I mean, he could be in New York. I mean, honestly, and I mean, he could be anywhere in the Triad. We could take him up to RTP, drop him in anywhere, and I think he'd be successful just because of his talent. And not unlike other smaller communities around, we want to try to keep our young people in our community, and he's found his little space and his niche, and it's just exciting. We're just thrilled that other folks in the Triad are recognizing John's talent as well. They're coming and visiting us here. I talk all the time, Algernon, about being a good Triad neighbor. And that's what Lexington is. We're a great little Triad neighborhood. We're in support of the larger cities and as they are of us. And when you add to that collective, hey, there's something to do now on a Thursday or Friday or Saturday night in the Triad that might be different. And that is come to Lexington, check out kind of our food scene and what's going on here. And John is really leading the way with that. He's just bringing so many different options and educating us to a new palette of food beyond barbecue.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone in my audience, no matter where you might be, make a special trip, go down and see John Wilson in Uptown Lexington at Sophie's Cork and Ale. Really talented, very innovative. Like I said, he won our award, but we're also, because we want John here too. So we're actually Eat Drink Triad is hosting a pop-up weekend this upcoming weekend with John Wilson. And so if you can't get to Lexington, even though that's a very short trip, we are going to have John Wilson in Winston-Salem on Sunday morning for a Sunday brunch at the canteen, featuring his shrimp and grits burger, his award-winning burger. If you missed it, you have a chance to try it this Sunday morning. And then on Saturday for brunch, we're going to have him in High Point. And so, Lexington, y'all better hold on to John.
He's
getting out there on the circuit.
It's great though. But no, it's great because, as I said, that's what we should be doing: supporting each other, going into each other's neighborhoods, feeling comfortable with sharing. And we say it all the time. I've had a mayor's summit that I've had around the Triad, where we bring the large cities, small cities together. And when we talk about those, I tend to talk about places I've gone to eat in High Point and Winston and Burlington and over in Asheboro and Kernersville. And we all talk about kind of the food scene. And it's just fantastic what's going on all around the Triad. So as you said earlier, reach out, support these restaurants the best you can. And these individuals are really working hard.
And I want to, before I move on and get into the conversation about the ordinance, I do want to give a shout out, because you also have Chef Michael Moorfield down there at Rusted Roots, who I just recently learned about. And I'm already a huge fan of Chef Michael Moorfield. Go check him out. I love what he's doing there. You got Chef Nyla Curry over at Lulu Seafood. You got Sarove Red Donut Shop on Main Street. So you got a lot of great things happening in Lexington. And now you all are debating whether or not you're going to implement an ordinance to allow open carrying of alcohol. I will tell you, I did work, Triad Food and Beverage Coalition did work with John Hardister, our state rep, and the ABC committee. We have been a huge proponent of ABC reform. We like the reform package that the General Assembly produced, and think that some of the reforms are very common sense. We also think that more reforms are needed. When you look at the liquor shortage and some of the supply disruptions that we've had here in our state, so we need more reforms. And Mayor Clark, I'll tell you, when the bill or the package passed, the first meeting I had was with Mayor Alan Joins, and I said to him that I really felt like we needed to put a task force together and look at our entertainment district here in downtown Winston-Salem to create an ordinance that allowed people to open carry with alcohol in that district. And I tell you, it was about 3 days after that meeting, I read in the dispatch that Lexington, out front of everybody, out front of Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem, Lexington was debating the ordinance. What brought about the quick reaction to this new policy?
As I mentioned before, how it's not just me, we're a team down here. When we talk about our citizens, our entrepreneurs, our city administration and council, it really got pushed by our entrepreneurs and our brewery owners that are down here, our restaurant owners, and our Main Street organization, which is Uptown Lexington. We're wildly known for our Main Street in terms of we call it Uptown. Most people probably refer to it as downtown, but really kind of collectively, when this came on board, we got inundated at City Hall saying, hey, we would love to see this. What do we need to do collectively? How do we get there? And folks have probably heard about our Depot district, in which is just a block or two from our Uptown Main Street. We have gotten awarded a big federal grant. We are moving forward on creating a rail stop here in Lexington. There's already growth around that. That project is now a when project. It's not an if project, since it's now been funded with the help of our senators in DC, Senator Tillis particularly, and also Congressman Budd helped with that. And that's just growth that's happening. And that's really, we have the areas to explore this. We wouldn't be having this conversation probably 10 or 15 years ago, because we did not have that collective mix of restaurants, pubs, breweries. That has all come online in Lexington really in the last 10, particularly even 5 years. And we made an ordinance change within Lexington several years ago. You used to have to buy, if you were opening a restaurant, you had to buy what I called a full boat license. You had to have hard spirits, malt beverage, and wine, even if all you were serving was wine. We were one of the few cities across the state where you were not even allowed to have individual licenses. Now you can imagine that's not being very business friendly, particularly if you're a small business and you're opening up and you've got to spend an extra $1,000 on a license you're not even going to use. we made some of those changes years ago. And that's when we started seeing a Brewer's Kettle pop up, a Sophie's Cork and Ale, those sort of things came online. So the discussion was really brought to us in terms of the citizenry saying, we'd like to see this in Lexington. And from there, our business development department got on board, started saying, what is this? What does it look like? And so we're currently in the process of getting educated as a council, because you can imagine we're starting to get a lot of questions.
Yeah, I would encourage all Triad cities to be as proactive as you all are. I mean, to at least get, like you said, get the education and understand what the possibilities and the opportunities are. One of my first introductions to the food scene, maybe not in Lexington, but perhaps was Davie County, was Dion's. Right there. I guess that's number 8 or something, right off of Highway 52. And he operated in a he's in a dry county. Couldn't serve alcohol. I think you had to bring your own. I was having dinner with someone there, and she told me that to make sure I stopped by the grocery store and bring a bottle of wine to dinner. I was confused. Yeah. So I say that to say, Davidson County and in and around Lexington, that's a fairly conservative part of our state. And I think parts of it is still dry, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, about 2 years ago, the county put that forth to the citizens, and there was a referendum and voted that Davidson County go wet. So it is a wet county now.
Well, and I only bring that in because to say what kind of opposition are you hearing to this ordinance that you're debating?
So I'm gonna back up just real quick. Back in the 80s, when Lexington went to liquor by the drink, the opposition was that you're going to start seeing, people that's just drunk laying on the side of the road. You're just going to have traffic accidents. I mean, there's all these concerns that started happening then, and none of that came about. We fast forward to us within Lexington, something we did a few years ago. The General Assembly passed the brunch bill to where instead of 12 on a Sunday, you could start purchasing at 10. And Lexington, we adopted that very quickly. To allow folks to come and again enjoy our food scene earlier on a Sunday. And we just preach personal responsibility. I mean, that's what this is. And you're not being forced to have a drink at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, but if you choose to, you can. So the opposition that I'm hearing those same things. Oh my goodness, we're going to have people just walking around. They're going to be falling into the streets. And what is that going to look like in terms of alcohol, DUIs, DWIs, those sort of things? And we are checking and talking to other communities that are considering this, other communities outside of here that have done this. What do we see? But the cultures have changed. I mean, I kind of call this a coffee culture, particularly the younger group. They go to coffee shops and they sit around with their friends and they have a cup of coffee. They go to a brewery, or they go to a pub, or they go somewhere, and it's a crafted beer that is, it's layered. It's got different flavors, all of these things that they enjoy. And they might have a couple. This isn't, a Saturday night frat party, 50-cent draft, let's go. It's a little more cultured. It's a little more refined in that sense. And so you'll always have those outliers, but I think if we are a responsible community and have been, and we've had these steps that we've seen. We saw that change in the 80s. We saw that change when we made the alcohol ordinance to where it could be just a simple one license if you had a wine shop. We saw that change with the brunch bill. And those concerns that I'm getting, that I'm hearing from, as you mentioned, a little bit more of a conservative voice that we start to see, we're able to show them in the past those transitions and how they've really been positive as opposed to negative.
If you're just now joining us, you are listening to Eat, Drink, Triad. This is your leading source for everything that's happening with the local food and beverage community throughout the entire Triad. And the other voice that you hear with me is Mayor Newell Clark. And we are having a conversation about an ordinance that's being debated in Lexington that would allow the open carrying of alcohol. If you want to listen to the extended version of this conversation, don't forget, you can always subscribe to Eat, Drink, Triad Podcast. You can go to eatdrinktriadpodcast.com. You can also subscribe and download the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Pandora. Mayor, as you all look at this ordinance, and I hear you. I mean, you're very much in the genesis of debating it, and you're being educated about it. I would strongly encourage your council to look at what they've done in Savannah. I love
That's what I
Savannah,
mentioned. I mentioned that
and
in our meeting. Yeah.
I don't see any more people dying from alcohol-related deaths in Savannah than I do in any other community across this country. But it's total open carry across the entire city. And my first trip to Savannah, I think I was at the bar. We were getting ready to check into the hotel room. A lot of times you go have a drink when you first arrive, and I was sitting there, and friends of mine wanted to go leave off to have dinner. They didn't even want to go up to the room, and I hadn't finished my drink. And the bartender looked at me and she said, "Sir, I can put that in a cup if you want to take it to go." And I said, "No, ma'am." I said, I'm not trying to get in no trouble. And she said, "No, it's legal." I said, you sure?" And she said, "I'm positive." And I said, "Go ahead and do it." And I said, "I want you to write your name and number down. So if I get pulled over, or I'm walking, I'm not driving, if I get pulled over, I know who to contact." I bring up that story to say, because I think part of what has to happen if Lexington was to go in this direction, is that residents have to be better educated about what's going on, but then also the bar owners as well as the bar staff have to be really educated so that they can educate customers about what can and cannot go on. Are y'all considering those types of measures, or is it still too far early in the process for you all?
No, it's very much part of our conversation, and I'll something to mention about this. The actual cup. Let's go to that. Just a simple. This is part of the legislation as well. If someone were to leave, say, a restaurant in Uptown, and there on the square just a block away, there is a band playing for one of our street festivals that we're having. The way it's written here is you could walk out of that restaurant with your cup and walk up to the square, and the cups that have to be provided by the restaurant owners or the pub owners, they actually have the writing on there that it states that you got to be 21 and over. It states that this is for the social district, so in terms of policing, it's not like folks just walking around with a red Solo cup and they're driving uptown. That this was from a restaurant. That this is part of that social district, and even the beverage that you would be carrying, we're talking about how is that identified, so we can make sure we can control that and make sure that it's being done in a safe manner for everyone. Again, it was led by our restaurants to begin with, but that was kind of the question is, hey, we're going to need the city to help us with this, educate us, and we'll have to educate them as we look to vote in this ordinance. Again, we haven't voted on it yet, but if it passes, we'll put some teeth behind that in terms of how do you police that, how do you monitor that. But if you've never been here to Lexington, as a good example, we're creating kind of this little brewery campus down around our depot. We've got a cidery that's there, we've got a beer brewery that's there, and if you were at that and you walked over to the other one, it makes sense right now. I mean, literally, they're within eyesight, and this is. When I say a street between them, it's not a city street necessarily in terms of traffic, but there's an alleyway between the two. And it just makes sense that you could walk from one to the other. Or maybe you got a drink at one place, but you wanted to partake in the food truck that's at the other. That depot district really lends itself for that. Our main street is very linear. It's north and south. Third to third is our uptown district. 7 or 8 different restaurants and pubs in that area. Again, it makes sense for it. So we're learning what that looks like, but also, and I keep going back to the cup, the idea of identifying, exactly, what you're carrying and where it's going and that sort of thing. That helps our police, that helps our restaurants. And as an example, if you're leaving one restaurant, it's not like, well, I'm going to leave this restaurant with this alcoholic beverage, and you walk into another you cannot take that into the next restaurant. All of this is in the ordinance. You can imagine how that helps a server or a host. If you walk in and you're carrying that identified cup, then we know, hey, sir, you need to dispose of that before you come in.
And if I recall correctly, I think that's how it works in Savannah. You can leave the bar with the cup of alcohol, and you can walk to where you're going, but the next location will stop you and say, hey, you cannot bring that alcohol into their establishment. So it
I'm
works
glad,
very identically.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because literally in our council meeting, one of our councilmen said, who else is doing something like this? Who else can we talk to? And that was my response. I said, you can call Savannah tomorrow and ask them
Yeah.
how they've done it and how they've been doing it.
You've got some other bigger cities like New Orleans and others that do similar things. I can't recall if Las Vegas does that same thing. I know like cities like New York actually don't do it. But I think Savannah's interesting because not the entire state of Georgia does it. You can't do it in Atlanta, but Savannah has adopted that as a special regulation or ordinance for themselves. You mentioned the police, and I know you're very thoughtful in terms of how you approach these issues. So I know you're doing this in coordination with your law enforcement agencies down in Lexington. What is their thoughts about it? I mean, are they saying that this is something that they won't be able to enforce, or are they saying, hey, with the right rules and regulations crafted, that it's doable?
That's part of the conversation. Whenever we look at anything like an adoption of a social district, one of my first calls is going to be to the chief and say, hey, what kind of pressure does this put on our men and women on a given night? How does that look in terms of and the response simply was, we can do this, but if we do it right. And that is exactly what you were saying, having that dialogue of, how do we police this? How does this, what does that look like? How do we know to identify it? Because the other piece of that too is you want folks to enjoy themselves, have a good time when they come here to visit. You don't want to be making a bunch of arrests. and that is that education piece. Hey folks, if it goes into law, this is what that looks like. This is how you can do that in Lexington. Again, I think one of the things that's fortunate for us, we're benefiting from decades of work in terms of creating a main street and an uptown, and now working on a depot district that is, again, they border each other. It lends itself to that. We're not talking about, you're going to be on Main Street and you're, if you get in your car and you leave this district, you're breaking the law. This is talking about someone who's walking around in the social district. These areas will be clearly designated. There'll be clearly certain times that it'll be allowed, and those sort of things as well. And so that's the dialogue. And that's when we lean on that professional staff and talk to the chief, talk to our law enforcement personnel to say, how does this work for you guys? And then in that same dialogue, though, with the restaurant owners, okay, what would you like to see? How does this benefit you and help your economics? That also gives enjoyment and helps everyone within the city. So it's a collective dialogue. But from the public safety side, absolutely, we're talking with the PD. And again, their answer was not no. It was, okay, let's figure out how we make this work. We have a limited area where this would take place. I think it would be very taxing on our community, and I'll use Savannah as an example. You said the whole city. If these areas we are talking about are conducive for pedestrian traffic, and that's where it's important also that we talk about that. We're not talking about over at the Walmart shopping place and Lowe's and restaurants there that you're leaving from a restaurant and going over to Lowe's and carrying a beer. That is not at all what we're talking about. We're finding those areas in the community where again, pedestrian traffic makes sense.
That's good. That's my last question. For with the way the ordinance is structured now, and again, this could be too early as you keep sort of working through it all. With those bars and restaurants in that special district, would they be paying like an extra fee to be able to have this benefit? And would that be an expectation or?
That's a very good question. I'll tell you that has not been a dialogue that we've had. It hasn't been a recommendation from staff. As you can imagine, if there's already an additional expense for them to have a printed particular cup that they're going to have, is that something that if we're going to require all of them to have that, that's an additional expense to them. We have not had a recommendation from staff to say there should be an additional fee or anything of that nature. I'm sure that'll be some dialogue that will take place. Honestly, I think if we do this right, and that's typically what we try our best to do, turn over every rock, make sure we're looking at public safety. We're looking at the advantages for a small economy to add something like this in addition. Is it going to benefit us? in that sense, we're at a place where we're ready for that. Again, 10 years ago, we weren't ready for this. But as we're making those decisions, it wouldn't surprise me that we put something like this in place and then we start getting requests in other little areas of the city. And we're going to have to evaluate whether that's works or doesn't. And it could very well. Greensboro's great about this. Greensboro has some little areas where they have, a house that's been converted into a restaurant, and then it's a little shop across the street. And all of a sudden, it's like this little hidden neighborhood that's got a little pizza place, a burger place, a little grocery store. We don't have those little pockets. This could be something that gives, again, spurs that economy, spurs those entrepreneurs to say, we could create a district like this within our, business area or business district of our neighborhood that kind of borders the residents, but it's kind of on a business district going into a residential area. So.
Well, I applaud you all on at least taking on the challenge to figure it out. And I think that when you look at local government, local cities, that's what makes this country so great. That is a place we can experiment with a lot of ideas and policies and try to figure out what works. And then you hope if it works at the local level, it may become a state policy. If it works at the state level, before you know it, they may be having conversation about it in Washington. So I applaud Lexington for jumping out there under your leadership and at least experimenting. And I've heard several communities across North Carolina that has poo-pooed the legislation and have said they won't even try. They won't even try to experiment. And even here in Winston-Salem, which is a much larger community, we've heard some opposition to it already, and we haven't even written an ordinance yet. There's nothing even existing yet. And so I think people should calm down and just let the process play out. I can recall now, last year when the ABC committee implemented mixed cocktails to go, when COVID hit, I was told that was the end of the world, and that you would not be able to drive 5 feet down any roadway without getting in an accident because everybody would be out there drunk. And I've yet to hear about one accident across the entire state of North Carolina that was related to mixed cocktails to go. So I think, again, some of those accusations and conspiracy theories were disproven. I also want to remind people that if people want to break the law, it's very easy to do so. I mean, if I want to go out and drive drunk, I could go do that right now. I get off this show, go jump in my car and go barreling down 40 with a bottle of Jim Beam, and I'm hanging out the window. That's what I want to do. But there are laws that prevent that. And I think people need to have some common sense when they approach this, because bad actors will be bad no matter what the rules and the policy says. I mean, there's nothing stopping anybody from going to a convenience store, walking right in there, buying a can of beer, getting back in their car, popping the cap on it, and driving down the street. Now, that's illegal. And if they get caught, they'll face, really tough penalties and fines and maybe jail time, et cetera. But there's nothing stopping it. And I think at the end of the day, we'll never get to a point where we can totally legislate morality. Good people will be good, bad people will be bad. And then we have elected officials like Newell and so many others, Frank Calicut and others down in Lexington. And their job is to just try to create some guardrails to all that. And so, Mayor, again, I applaud you all. I'll be watching carefully. I'm actually going to send this show to Mayor Alan Joines, and hopefully that'll spur some of our elected officials along here locally as well. Again, before I log off, I do want to encourage you, if you are looking for a great staycation, go down to Lexington. If you're in Winston, Greensboro, High Point, Charlotte, Salisbury, anywhere nearby, great place to go, great local restaurants to visit. I'm a big fan of Bull City Cider, Goose and the Monkey, Poor Folks Pizza, you name it. I love it. And then coming up for my audience, just so you know, coming up November 15th, the Black Empowerment Network will be hosting a private screening of Making North Carolina. We're going to be doing that at Sophie's Cork and Ale in Lexington. That's Monday, September 15th, kicks off at 5:30 with the reception. Guess what? You'll get a chance to see the Making North Carolina episode featuring myself and some of the work that I've been able to do across North Carolina. We're going to screen that in Lexington. Mayor Clark will be there to lead a community conversation, as well as Antoinette Kerr, who's the publisher of Davidson Local. She'll be on site doing some interviews as well. So if you live in Lexington or nearby, mark your calendar for that. That's coming up in just about a month. And then always make sure you stay tuned to WTOV for your Eat, Drink, Triad Restaurant of the Week. The Eat, Drink, Triad show broadcast every Sunday morning And you can also subscribe and download the Eat, Drink, Triad podcast if you want the extended conversation. Until next time, y'all stay locked in.